Welcome to day 2 of Fasting Forward. I'm John McCulley. I'm a VP of Operations and Business Owner here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm excited to have you along with me. One of the best lessons I ever learned came from listening to God, not from a boardroom, not from another leader, and not from a coach. It came from learning how to restrain myself. Today's day 2. We're talking about hearing God clearly. Yesterday was about returning to God with our whole heart. Today is about learning to recognize his voice. In John 10:27, Jesus says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." It's an incredibly simple verse, but it has an interesting meaning when you think about it deeply, because he doesn't say they strain, and he doesn't say they guess, and he doesn't say they hustle to figure it out. He says they hear. One of the biggest challenges for leaders is not that God isn't speaking, it's that we're surrounded by so much noise. Noise from the pressure and from the urgency and from the opinions of everybody else around us. Expectations, emails, texts, social media. You're always feeling so many inputs that are just high expectations. Leadership clarity often comes from restraint. The first thing we want to focus on today, especially looking at our scripture about how my sheep hear me, is that you need to create quiet before clarity. What does that mean? We often want our clarity immediately, meaning we do things to push things out and we expect just everything to become clear. But clarity usually follows a long period of quiet, sitting down in it. Maybe you're just reading. Maybe you read one verse and you just sit still. Because our lives are loud. And if your life is loud, your discernment will be cloudy. So you may not understand what's happening around you. You may not get the message. Now, this doesn't mean you have to isolate yourself. This means you do things with intention. So where can you create a space today to listen without distraction? Is it a walk? A pause before a meeting? 5 minutes without input, maybe? Because God's voice is steady, but noise competes for his attention. So you really have to make time for that focus and make time to listen with clarity. The second focus for today is to pause before reacting. Now, I know this is a leader, but I learned this lesson from my wife. Carrie is so good at just taking a beat because most mistakes aren't moral failures, especially in leadership. They're rushed responses. How about that quick email you sent the other day before really thinking about it? How about a really sharp word, a big comeback, a decision made before you prayed about it or thought about it, if that's your thing? You make decisions too fast, sometimes it changes lives. Carrie has modeled this in our home and our life. Pausing doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. She really takes time to think about the decisions she's going to make before making them. A pause also creates room for discernment. It keeps your emotions from driving your decisions. Now, she might have learned that one from me, but she's really, really good at it. Before you respond today, ask yourself, have I listened long enough? And our third focus today is to teach teams, families, kids, but teams at work to value listening over noise. This is such a hard thing, especially if you have a young team, but it's an important thing that I learned a long time ago because culture follows the leader's model. So if you move fast, your team will move fast. If you react quickly, your team is going to react quickly. If you speak without thinking, they'll do the same thing. But when a leader listens well, the team feels safe, valued, and clear. This goes for your family too. If you listen well, they'll feel safe, valued, and clear. I'm really bad at this sometimes. I always have a solution. But Stephen Covey reminds us that most people listen to reply, not to understand. He has a famous quote that says, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." Such valuable, valuable wisdom coming from a statement, not a question. Biblical leadership listens first. It asks better questions. It slows conversations. It becomes quieter. It slows everything down enough to hear what matters. Sometimes it slows it down just long enough for a sliver of God's voice to get in your ear and teach you what is supposed to happen next. Jesus says his sheep hear his voice and follow him because he was teaching us that hearing comes before moving. So today's not about forcing answers, it's about sharpening awareness. One of the things I want to do today is pray for sensitivity, not speed, not certainty, sensitivity. Just a very, very simple God, help us hear you clearly. Very simple prayer to get us through listening intently. One of the things I want to bring up at this point in the study is just reminding you the importance of biblical fasting, because we need to ground today in what matters most when it comes to biblical fasting and hearing God clearly. Because biblical fasting is not earning God's attention, it's about removing what competes for it. When we fast from food, we're intentionally quieting that physical hunger so we can become more and more aware of the spiritual hunger. And it just becomes a reminder to listen when you do that. I know as I've been through this portion of my fast, the weakness has become an invitation to depend on God in these moments. Now, I've gotten short a couple of times because it's only a couple of days in, and it's really hard to get used to it. But for leaders, fasting is especially powerful because we're constantly consuming opinions and information just all day long. The pressure and the responsibility builds and builds and builds, and you're consuming all day long. Fasting interrupts that cycle, taking a breath and focusing on that physical disruption so that you can take more time and think about what God says. Every time during this fast that your body reminds you that it wants food, let that moment return to prayer. God, help me hear you. God, slow my response. God, guide my decisions. Because fasting doesn't make God speak louder, it makes us listen better. It makes it quieter so that we can hear better. And when leaders listen well, they lead well. So, as we conclude day 2, just be praying for God to quiet you. If you're having trouble fasting with food, there's a bunch of guides online on how to do it right and do it safely and do it healthy. I'm not an expert in that, so I won't give you any tips. Had a couple of people ask me about it at the end of day 1. I just don't have any tips for the physical part of it. But as you finish day 2, pay attention to what you heard today and what you didn't rush to answer. Because hearing God clearly often means slowing your response, not accelerating it. We're going to talk about integrity over image and why character becomes your compass when pressure rises. If today was about listening, tomorrow is about living what you hear. So, create some quiet tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 3. Thanks, everybody.